You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week, we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about where my tax dollars are going, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, this week, I'm happy to welcome back to our show for a conversation Mr. Richard Nicolello, the Presiding Officer of the Nassau County Legislature, who represents the 9th District, which includes parts of New Hyde Park, Garden City Park, Mineola, Williston Park, and other nearby communities. He's also recently announced that he is not going to seek re-election later this year, and he's here to discuss that decision and hopefully a whole lot more. Mr. Nicolello, welcome back to this week's Long Island News.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Happy to be back.
Good to see you. Good to see you. It's kind of an overcast day. It's we always celebrate Friday, but it was a little
it's a little chill in the air today.
Yeah. And spring right around the corner. Yes. Here, it always seems weird.
Not complaining though. We didn't really have a winter this year, so
right. Well, until the end of April or the beginning of May, I don't feel like we're ever out of the woods. Right?
You never know.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the elephant in the room. Newsday reported that you'll complete your 28th year of service, including 6 as presiding officer and 4 before that as deputy presiding officer. So why is now the right time to leave, and what went into the decision?
Well, I was one of the original legislators when we first formed the legislatures, and 28 years is a long time to serve. It's a 2-year term, so which means it was 14 elections. It is if you're going to do it the right way, you have to really commit a tremendous amount of time, not just on the work part of it, but also in the communities. And it takes a toll on your family. So after all these years, I've decided that it was time for me to leave the legislature. But I'm really confident that there were many other people who could step forward and provide the leadership that Nassau needs.
Right. When I heard about that, you were deciding to retire, I was wondering whether it was a part of it was the political atmosphere in our day and age.
No, that really did not go into it. I have seen over the course of my term in the legislature that it has gotten more acrimonious. The legislature itself, my colleagues in the legislature, by and large, we've had our disagreements, but we've kept it more collegial.
Right.
But the politics has definitely spilled over into the chambers, and some of the issues and the way they've been presented is difficult. But that really was not the reason. I mean, again, 28 years is a long time, so it's you have to know when it's time to go, and I did.
I mean, that is 14 elections. I think of that. That's kind of stunning when you think of, and it's every 2 years.
Every 2 years. So it just rolls into each other. They never really stop running.
So you have an election campaign committee that basically doesn't go away.
Right.
Yeah.
You start running for the next election as soon as you finish
I mean, is that a good system?
I actually believe that the terms should be longer, not just for the legislators, but also for example, the state legislators and other offices. I think while ostensibly you're closer to the people because you have to run every 2 years, you really never stop running. But if you have a 4-year term, I think it gives you an ability to spend more time doing really the government work as opposed to the political side of it. So I would encourage people to consider moving to a 4-year term.
Yeah. Who would be able to change that?
I believe the initiative should come from the legislature itself. The only thing I don't know is whether we could do it ourselves or whether it would have to go to the voters for a referendum. Right. So,
but it would be proposed by somebody.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, the optics, there always used to be a thing in politics about, at least when I was growing up, optics. If it looked bad, don't do it.
Right.
That seems to have kind of gone by the wayside. There doesn't seem so much concern about, we're doing this terrible thing. Well, that's going to look terrible. We don't care. And it's just full speed ahead.
Well, some have this view that any publicity is good publicity. I mean, that's not my point of view, but there are definitely some people in politics and government that seem to have that perspective. It's just, it wears on people after a while, I think.
Yeah, I think it does too. The public gets to, that's what they see.
Right.
So,
why are they doing that now?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Well, So what's next for you? Newsday speculated you're one of the names in the mix for an opening on the state Supreme Court bench. Is that a possibility?
I guess it's always a possibility, but I've had no discussions along those lines. You know, usually it's the political leadership that makes the decision in terms of who to nominate for those positions. So I've had no discussions at this point with anyone. And, you know, I've always been a part-time legislator and a part-time lawyer. In essence, they were two full-time jobs.
Yeah,
so
right.
If I leave and nothing else happens, then I will simply go back to practicing law. So which is not a bad outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll just have one, you know, a little bit less stress in the family, fewer nights out, fewer weekends out, more concentration on legal practice, which would be good.
How many kids do you have? Well, kids
are
probably
older. They're grown.
Grown up, right,
yes.
right.
Two children.
Yeah.
So they've seen my entire career in politics. So
right.
They're fully supportive of me leaving too.
Well, they get dad back for a little while, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
And okay, the next thing we have here is Nassau County legislators, obviously including yourself, adopted a new map back in February that redraws the boundaries of all 19 legislative districts to allow for population changes reflected in the 2020 census. Now, there was a lot of back and forth on that, and some may call what happened gerrymandering. What's your take on this? I just recently read it used to be a board that decided what the districts would be, and then it was taken over by the legislature.
Actually, I'm not sure what it was before the legislature existed, but this process that we followed was in the charter for the new legislature, so it goes back to the 90s.
Okay.
And what we do is we form a committee from both sides that sit down and look at the lines, because every 10 years when they do the census, you have to redraw the district lines to make sure the population's equal, and there's many other considerations. Mm-hmm. But so this committee met numerous times. They had 10, 12 hearings throughout the county, testimony, and they were unable to reach a consensus. So it comes to the legislature. We looked at their two maps, and we thought that both of them were flawed. We thought that both of them were gerrymanders. So we moved on from that. We hired an expert attorney, as well as the resources of his firm, to do the best that they could in terms of creating districts that are, fair fight districts that equal population, that are relatively compact, contiguous, meaning they don't jump over no longer on sound and things like that. Right. So I think the maps that we came up with were very well done. So we're very confident in them.
Yeah, I think the map that the special master did that one year is going to be something that people point back to forever.
Right.
It was, just on first glance, it was kind of ludicrous. People up in Yonkers, what do they have in common with people in Southampton? Or, these were, I think it was the whole South Shore, and then it just went up into Westchester.
Yes, that was actually the map that got thrown out. That was the state legislators that did that. Right. It was the congressional district, as you said, went from the tip of Suffolk through Nassau into Queens, over the Sound into Westchester, up into Yonkers. It's crazy stuff.
Imagine trying to ride herd on that kind of a district.
Trying to see all your constituents would be a little bit difficult. Yeah,
right. It just occurred to me that, with the advent of AI now, maybe in the not too distant future, the AI will be drawing the district lines, and then we can see what kind of fights break out because of that.
That could be, but they're not going to be able to take over radio shows. So
that's true. That's right. We'll get to observe and respond.
That's right.
You know what, too? I have a question. I was speaking to a legislator, and we were talking about gerrymandering in specifically, and I had always felt that it was, pretty close to illegal. It just didn't seem right. And this legislator came out and said, no, we feel it is illegal. And I'd never heard anybody say that. We've been doing this now for, I think it's 212 years.
Yes. Yeah.
The system definitely needs changing.
It may not be the perfect system.
Yeah. You look at these maps sometimes and you just say, well, could you draw one that wouldn't lean left or right?
Right.
I don't know if that's possible.
I guess theoretically, yes, but perfection is not possible. But I can say this about our districts. The Republican majority had the votes and passed the redistricting. 15 of the 19 districts have an enrollment edge for Democrats. So
Really?
So I mean, again, they are. You can win those districts regardless of what party you're enrolled in, and if you have the right message and you work it hard, you'll be successful.
Right. You're listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and my guest today is Mr. Richard Nicolello, the presiding officer of the Nassau County Legislature, who represents the 9th District, which includes parts of New Hyde Park, Garden City Park, Mineola, Williston Park, and others. Now, back in January, legislators unanimously advanced a new collective bargaining agreement with the county's largest law enforcement union and authorized more than $400 million in borrowing for infrastructure projects. Can you tell us what went into this to get a unanimous bipartisan agreement?
The police contract, actually, they've been without a contract for a number of years, but Nassau has an oversight board, NIFR. It was imposed by the state a couple of decades ago, actually.
Right.
So they established a pattern, and every collective bargaining agreement has to fit within this pattern in terms of what the percentage increases are, healthcare contributions and things of that nature. So we had negotiated contracts with smaller unions, the superior officers, the detectives, but the Police Benevolent Association represents the bulk of your officers on the street, all of them actually.
Right.
And so it's much larger issue, membership, et cetera.
There's 2,400 of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, the contract that was negotiated fit within this pattern that was established and was ultimately approved by NIFR. So we think it's in the best interest of the county. And there's some increases in salary, but there's givebacks on the other side. So we think it really is something, and it fits within our budgetary framework, which is why I think you have all 19 of us voting for us.
Right. Well, the infrastructure obviously has been, I think in general, across the country, has been kind of ignored. People worry about expenditures of things, and that never seems to come into the equation.
Right.
And then when it does hit the fan, so to speak, that's a lot of money. Building bridges and roads. I spoke to one of the county supervisors, and I was unaware at the time, but to pave a road costs $1 million a mile.
Yeah.
I was stunned. I said, no wonder you only do a couple of miles at a time.
Right.
I mean, what kind of money do you have to laid aside to be able to actually do it?
You're correct, and if you don't do it, it gets actually more expensive. The longer you let these problems fester.
Right. Well, and in the meantime, you're plugging potholes.
Right.
And so you're paying for that too.
Right. 100% right. So, but that would also pass unanimously the capital plan, which was a $400 million plus borrowing, and that's over several years. So we have, we plan it out over 3 or 4 years, and then we do another one next year, et cetera.
Right.
But you're correct in that the infrastructure is very important. Unfortunately, the monies that the federal government had sent to the state to give to the localities a couple of years ago, the big infrastructure bill, never filtered down to Nassau County or Suffolk or any other municipalities. The state has kept it. So the state is going to be using those monies for, I guess, infrastructure. But unfortunately, the county, we were eagerly awaiting to receive those monies, and they're not coming directly to us. So the state will make those decisions now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how come we weren't out there with signs around the governor's mansion yelling about the money?
We should have.
I wonder. So the federal government didn't mandate that it's got to go to certain places. They just said, okay, here's a chunk of change, and you decide.
Right. We think the intention was to get it down to the localities, but the state had other plans for it.
Right. Mm.
Yeah.
And then we have the big one that is the boondoggle. I always call it the boondoggle. What's the latest on the casino at the Nassau Coliseum? Well, where do you stand on it? What do you think? Is it a good idea? Is it a good deal?
I have an open mind to it, and once we do get an item, we actually were waiting for apparently they're negotiating a transfer of the lease from the current owner to Sands, and once that is presented to the legislature, then the legislature will have to consider that transfer of the lease. We'll have to approve it, and that has not been submitted to us yet, so we don't have the details at this point.
Right.
Once we do, we'll have full hearings. There's a rules committee, which will be the first step. There'll be a full hearing. It gets past the rules committee, goes to the full legislature, so people will have an opportunity to have their voices heard. We'll have an opportunity to ask questions and get as much detail as possible. So I want to, the devil's in the details. I want to find out exactly what the implications are.
Well, let's just say you had your own paintbrush. What would you do with that chunk of property? And I mean, there's other issues there too. The Sloan Kettering has a little corner pocket, so now they're an entity that's going to speak up and want to be heard. It's as people pick little pieces, it gets more complicated.
Right.
It's not just the
that's true. We did that several years ago. For the entire length of time I've been on the legislature, 28 years, that's been an issue, that property. Right. And there's been multiple plans to develop, but you had a lighthouse project. Scott Reckler and RXR had a plan that we were considering and hopeful it moved forward. It never did. So
right.
We'll see. I mean, if it takes this project at this time to do it, then it's something I'll definitely consider. I mean, The problem for office space is people aren't working in offices anymore. Mm-hmm. And so the office space is not at a premium. So is there going to be any desire to build office space there? And if not, what else would you put there? If you build just housing, there's tremendous implications for the local school districts, the resources, et cetera. So it's a complicated issue.
Even in the local area, I mean, we have two big schools right here. We've got Nassau Community and we've got Hofstra next door. Hofstra says no. Nassau kind of likes the idea, but they're also in a position to be the one who trains all the new workers that are going to work over there. So they've got a vested interest in the. It'll just be interesting as it rolls down the hill to see exactly who says what about what. Right. The gambling was only supposed to be, or the way we hear about it, 10% of the total area that whatever building they put up is going to take. Right. I was on the other side of this. They spent $11 million on the Coliseum to put some fancy flashing on the outside of the walls, and we wound up with less seats, which led the Islanders to say we're not a regulation field anymore, and now we have a new arena. To me, these are financial games that people play to make a lot of money.
Yeah, I wish that we had built the UBS on the Coliseum property.
Yeah,
I mean, it would have been a perfect place for it. So that was a lost opportunity. And as you said, unfortunately, with the UBS right down the road now, the Coliseum, and I work across the street much of the time, is basically empty most of the time. So it's not a viable entity anymore. So whatever we're doing there.
Well, certainly the people who put on productions and shows or whatever don't consider it a viable entity. Right. It's still a perfectly good arena.
Oh, yeah.
And, if I was a rock and roll band that had a decent following, why not the Coliseum?
Right.
I mean, but I guess if you're the booker or you're the guy, if I can get 100,000 people to come to my show, let's do it at the UBS,
Yeah, exactly. And you have the Garden, you have the UBS, you have the Prudential Center in New Jersey, the Barclays. So there's a lot of competition. This one's a little smaller, the Coliseum seating capacity, as you mentioned. I honestly think on that property, whatever goes there, they should have some sort of entertainment destination. It could be like a 4,000, 5,000 seat venue. Right. Something like the Beacon in the city, which draws acts that can't play the Garden anymore.
Yep.
But you see great bands there and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, definitely. That's. I'll remember you said that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad. It's just a sad thing. We saw so many good shows there, and they were perfectly fine.
Yep.
And the other thing is that as time marches on, of course, when you parked at the Coliseum 25 years ago, you didn't pay $45 for somebody to not watch your car all night, but you are now. And the other thing was with the railroad stop that was put in there. There's still give and take on that. People in the area say, why can't I use that train to go to work in the morning?
Right.
Well, because there's no show on. Well, what's that got to do with anything? All of these, but you said it, missed opportunities. I think a lot of the situations that arise, and they really do become missed opportunities. Because somebody just wasn't, thinking or wasn't on top of it. Right. Can we do this? Maybe.
That's decades now. It's been going on. So it's something that we have to.
I think generally you see a lot of things like that. You see a good idea come up, but it may boil down to someone doesn't have the political will to suggest it.
Right.
For fear of, you're crazy. That's a dumb thing to do. Oh, okay. You'll only know if it's a dumb thing to do 10 years out when, it's the same thing with, and I'm going to interview the gentleman from New York State Department of Cannabis Management.
Okay.
Now, here's an interesting one. because most of the towns on Long Island seem to have opted out. And to me, if I was a legislator or a lawmaker, I'd say, well, that's kind of the smart tack to take.
Right.
Because if you opted in, you can't opt out.
Ever, right. Once you're in, you're in for good.
But if you opted out, you can sit back and watch and see how things go. The only problem here is, who are you going to watch?
Right.
Everybody opted out. Yeah. Nobody knows.
I think there's some exceptions on Long Island.
There may be.
Some villages and places that are still open to it.
We also have Native American reservations, right. And I think they're exempt from any of the, and I have heard people are already flocking out there.
But also I live in Western Nassau, so it's about 1.5 miles to the city line from my home. So there'll be opportunities, I'm sure, successful entrepreneurs will be building right at the city line.
Well, whether it's legal or not, it's already a proliferation of, which is why I think people maybe don't get so upset about it, but right. they do react, and we're going to talk to him about New York State. I think at this point in time, there's only 3 licenses that have been distributed.
It's been really slow. The concern I have is to understand the goals of this, but the real concern is that if we are so regulated and so taxed in New York State, you likely will still have an underground economy in cannabis.
Well, the state could price themselves out of business, yeah. But, and I noticed this recently, the chatter has turned to the safety of the drug.
Right.
So now they're pointing fingers at the drug you might buy from the guy you've been buying it for 20 years, but that could be bad. Right. Okay, but I talked to this guy, it's never been bad in 20 years. This guy has a better track record than you do.
Yeah. There is a growing concern, though, with fentanyl. It seems to be ubiquitous now, and it's such a dangerous
we saw that. We tracked that when that came here, and mostly fentanyl had to do with heroin. Right. That's what they used to cut it with. Apparently, the Chinese put out a batch or a whole shipment of fentanyl that was 100 times more powerful than what they had traditionally been using. Yeah. And this may sound strange, and it's all illegal activity. We get that. I kind of feel bad for the guy who did what he normally does and sold his product, and people died, and he got blamed.
There's a concept in my mind of assumption of the risk. If you're doing that and you
play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
Yeah.
But the people that won the prizes didn't necessarily have that in mind, right. And a lot of families. My other question is, and they never broke it down for me. You have heroin overdoses. I would like to see it broken down by age. And people say, well, I said, because we automatically think that when we hear about an OD, that it's a young person. And in my mind, I think there are quite a few very older people who this might be their last answer to life.
Right.
Up in their medicine cabinet is a little tissue with some stuff folded in it that they got maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Yeah. When you can't take it anymore, there's your answer.
Right.
And I'm wondering how many of those overdoses were for that reason.
Yeah. I'm sure that they have. I'm sure that the statistics exist somewhere. But
yeah.
I do know that the overdose issue is and the substance abuse is like every community. It's not particular communities. It's not lower income communities. It's every community.
Everybody.
Even the wealthier communities are taking a particularly big hit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yep. Yeah.
But look. The cannabis that exists today is tremendously more potent than existed 40 years ago. So your generation grew up, smoking marijuana and stuff, but it's a different drug today.
Yeah.
And when this becomes available, the people going into the stores have to be very careful about the potency of what they're buying, and how they're buying it, and how it's consumed.
I get the feeling that the people that are going shopping have quite a bit of experience with this thing. I don't think right. I think they probably might know more than the guy behind the counter and the so-called experts. Yeah.
It's the novices that
new people. Yes, and to me the real dangerous thing was the gummies,
right?
Because they're created in a lab somewhere, and a guy decides how potent that is,
right?
And if it's not marked somewhere or so that Joe Rogan did a whole comedy thing on it. And he went in and bought a gummy bear. And as he was leaving, he said to the guy, how many of these should I take? And the guy said, a leg.
Right.
And
That's exactly
he
right.
jumped back. He said, what do you mean a leg? Why are you making whole bears if I'm only supposed? So, beware. I mean, people should know those things. Now we've talked for about a half an hour. Anything you would want to say to the listening audience that's on your mind
No, I just would say that after 28 years, I enjoyed my time in office, and it is a worthwhile thing to get involved in if you want to make a difference in people's lives. There's nothing better than elected office. It's difficult at times to move the government, but the inertia is constantly battles you. But you can make a difference in so many people's lives by doing it, and it's really is rewarding, in the long run.
Yeah, I'll bet. But if I just put my head in that position, let's run for office, I think of the lumbering dinosaur that is government.
Right.
And to be able to get up every morning and take out your sword and, go for it, I got to hand it to you, because that's a tough one.
When I was new, it was striking, because you thought, well, this is an easy thing to do. It should be, we could do this right away. And it would take months and months of calls and follow-ups.
Yeah, right.
And, there's well-meaning people in government, but you feel that.
What did you wish you knew then that you know now?
That's a good question. I guess if I had looked and seen how much it would take in terms of away from the family and things like that, I might have, had a shorter career. Right. But that would be just about it.
Right. Because that probably is the major sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it is. There's no question about it.
Well, your kids grew up well. You got good kids.
Yeah, they're good kids. They've lived across the country. They've both back. My daughter's in Astoria. My son's in Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is a nice community.
Yeah. Oh, it used to be people would say Bed-Stuy.
You can't go in there, right?
Don't go there.
It's a nice neighborhood now. It's becoming a nice neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, it's nice. It'd be nice if we can turn around more of them like that.
Couldn't afford Williamsburg, which when I was growing up, you didn't want to go near Williamsburg.
Same thing.
Yeah, it was a disaster area.
Yep. Well, they get gentrified, and I feel sorry for all the misplaced people when that happens.
It's always been my question: is where do the misplaced people go? I mean, as gentrification takes over much of Brooklyn, what neighborhoods are left for people who don't have the means to go to Williamsburg?
Exactly. I don't know. I assume that some of them are on the streets.
Yeah, that would be an unfortunate result.
Sadly.
Yeah.
But, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
My guest today has been Mr. Richard Nicolello, the presiding officer of the Nassau County Legislature, who represents the 9th District, including parts of New Hyde Park, Garden City Park, Mineola, Williston Park, and other nearby communities. Thank you for taking the time to be here to speak with us, and good luck after your term is over.
Thank you.
And you'll still be working, so you're going to still answer the alarm clock and get up in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll be across the street from here. Right. I mean, look, I can see your building from my office.
Well, come over and visit us. Okay. Say hello. The clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to move on out of here. I'm Bill McIntyre, and remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts, and we're right here on the radio every Friday at 3 p.m. on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.